What happens when the most sophisticated alien civilization in the galaxy discovers that what they thought was humanity's greatest military force was just a scouting party? When the Zephyrian Empire's noble houses, with their centuries of genetic perfection and technological supremacy, realize they've been playing a game where they never understood the rules? In the depths of space, where politics determine survival and bloodlines command fleets, the aristocratic Zephyrians have built an empire spanning 12 star systems. Their noble houses have never known defeat, their warriors have never faced fear, and their leaders have never encountered a species that could challenge their divine right to rule. Until now. When a small human reconnaissance unit stumbles into Zephyrian space, what begins as a routine first contact scenario quickly transforms into a nightmare that will shake the very foundations of an empire. Because sometimes, the most terrifying discovery isn't that you're facing an enemy, it's realizing you never understood what an enemy could be. The Zephyrians are about to learn that in the vast darkness of space, there are predators far more dangerous than any they've ever imagined. And the worst part? These predators call themselves the Advanced Gur. Lord Commander Vexthera stood before the crystalline viewport of his flagship, watching the stars bend and twist as the Zephyrian fleet dropped out of hyperspace. His elongated features, perfected through generations of careful breeding, remained impassive as the tactical displays around the bridge hummed to life. The genetic modifications that marked him as nobility had given him enhanced cognitive processing, extended lifespan, and reflexes that could track a photon beam. Yet something about today's mission felt different. The bridge of the Sovereign's wrath reflected the pinnacle of Zephyrian military engineering. Officers with the characteristic pale blue skin and silver markings of the warrior caste moved with practiced efficiency between holographic displays that projected three-dimensional star maps and fleet formations. Each console was crafted from rare metals mined from the core worlds, and every surface gleamed with the subtle luminescence that marked Zephyrian technology. "My lord," announced Sub-Commander Zilthek, his voice carrying the measured tones that indicated his slight genetic modifications for enhanced vocal communication. "Long-range sensors detect the anomalous contacts in Grid 774. 3 vessels of unknown configuration, maintaining position near the asteroid field." Vexthera turned slowly, his movement deliberate and commanding. The ceremonial armor that marked his rank caught the bridge's ambient lighting, casting patterns across his face that emphasized his noble lineage. "Unknown configuration? Explain." Zilthek's fingers danced across his console, and the main display shifted to show 3 blocky, angular ships that looked nothing like the elegant curves and artistic design philosophy that characterized Zephyrian vessels. "The hulls appear to be constructed from primitive alloys, my lord. No energy shields detected. Their weapons systems are crude. Projectile-based rather than energy-based. The largest vessel measures barely 300 meters. A ripple of amusement passed through the bridge crew. 300 meters was considered a scout ship in the Zephyrian fleet. The Sovereign's wrath alone stretched nearly 2 kilometers and carried enough firepower to glass a continent. First contact with a primitive species, observed Communications Officer Nixvera, her enhanced neural implants already working to decode any transmissions from the unknown vessels. "Shall I prepare the standard subjugation protocols, my lord?" Vexthera considered this. The Zephyrian Empire had encountered dozens of primitive species during their expansion across 12 star systems. The pattern was always the same: initial contact, demonstration of superior firepower, negotiation from a position of absolute strength, and, finally, integration into the Empire as a vassal species. It was a process refined over centuries and had never failed. "Not yet," he decided. "I want to observe them first. These primitives have managed to achieve interstellar travel, which suggests they may have some value beyond simple labor. Deploy the reconnaissance drones. Full spectrum analysis of their technology, but maintain distance. I want to understand what we're dealing with before we make our presence known." The next several hours passed in routine observation. The Zephyrian drones, invisible to primitive sensors, circled the unknown vessels and transmitted detailed scans back to the fleet. What they discovered was both amusing and puzzling. The ships were indeed primitive by Zephyrian standards. They appeared to be constructed from standard metal alloys with minimal automation. Their propulsion systems were basic fusion drives that would have been considered obsolete by Zephyrian standards 3 centuries ago. Their weapons consisted of kinetic projectiles and simple energy beams that wouldn't penetrate even civilian-grade Zephyrian shielding. Yet there were anomalies. The ship's hull showed signs of extensive modification and repair, suggesting they had seen significant combat. Their formations and movement patterns indicated a level of tactical sophistication that seemed at odds with their primitive technology. Most puzzling of all, their crews appeared to be conducting detailed surveys of the asteroid field, mapping gravitational fluctuations and mineral compositions with surprising accuracy. Their explorers, concluded Science Officer Keelandro, his enhanced analytical capabilities processing the accumulated data. A survey mission, most likely. Their technology is primitive, but their methods are thorough. They've been here for approximately 12 standard days, conducting systematic exploration of this entire region. Vexthera nodded slowly. Explorers could be valuable. A species with the drive to push beyond their home system despite primitive technology might prove useful as scouts or miners once properly integrated into the Empire. Any indication of their home system's location? Negative, my lord. Their communications are encrypted, though the encryption appears to be relatively simple. However, they have made no transmissions that would indicate their origin point. Professional operational security. This gave Vexthera pause. Operational security suggested military training, which was unexpected for what appeared to be a scientific mission. Military explorers? Possibly, my lord. Their movement patterns suggest combat experience, and they maintain proper formation discipline even during survey operations. These are not civilian scientists. The tactical implications were interesting. A primitive species with military capabilities might prove more valuable than simple laborers, especially if they could be trained to use proper Zephyrian equipment. The Empire was always in need of additional forces for expansion and security operations. Initiate contact, Vexthera commanded. Standard first contact protocols. I want them to understand immediately that they are in the presence of their superiors. The Sovereign's Wrath and its escort vessels dropped their stealth fields and advanced toward the human ships at a leisurely pace designed to demonstrate confidence and overwhelming superiority. The Zephyrian formation was a work of art, with each ship positioned to create both an aesthetically pleasing display and an optimal firing solution. It was a formation that had caused countless primitive species to surrender without firing a shot. The response from the human vessels was immediate and unexpected. Instead of the panic or desperate attempts at communication that Vexthera expected, the three ships simply moved. In perfect coordination, they shifted from survey formation into what was unmistakably a combat formation, with the largest ship taking point while the two smaller vessels flanked at optimal support distances. There was no hesitation, no apparent communication, just smooth professional repositioning that spoke of extensive training and experience. "They're not running," observed Zilthek, surprise evident in his voice. "No," agreed Vexthera, studying the tactical display with growing interest. "They're preparing to fight." The absurdity of the situation was not lost on him. The three primitive vessels combined probably had less firepower than a single Zephyrian destroyer, and his fleet included 12 capital ships along with escorts. It was like watching insects prepare to attack a mountain. "Incoming transmission, my lord," announced Nyxvera. "They're using standard galactic trade frequencies." The translation matrix is having some difficulty with their language structure, but the message appears to be a request for identification and intentions. "They're challenging us?" The question came from Weapons Officer Ty Calef, whose enhanced reflexes were already calculating firing solutions for the primitive vessels. "Should I charge the primary batteries?" Vexthera held up a hand. "Wait. This is curious. They cannot possibly believe they can win against us, yet they show no signs of surrender. Either they are completely insane, or they know something we do not." He turned to his communications officer. "Send a standard response. Inform them they are in the territory of the Zephyrian Empire and must submit to imperial authority immediately." The response came back within minutes, translated by the ship's linguistic processors. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Reconnaissance Division. You have entered a region under active survey by Earth forces. Withdraw to a minimum distance of 50,000 kilometers and state your intentions, or you will be considered hostile." The bridge of the Sovereign's wrath fell silent. Sub-Commander Zilthek was the first to speak, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. "My lord, did they just order us to withdraw?" "It appears so," Vextera replied, though he was studying the tactical display with newfound attention. The human formation was textbook perfect for their technological level, positioned to maximize their limited firepower while maintaining mutual support. These were not panicking primitives. These were soldiers. "Preposterous," declared Tyklef. "My lord, one demonstration of our firepower will end this foolishness immediately. I recommend targeting their lead vessel with a reduced power beam. Enough to overload their primitive systems without destroying them completely." Vextera was about to agree when something in the human formation caught his attention. The ships had not moved closer or farther away, but their positioning had shifted subtly. It took him a moment to recognize what he was seeing, and, when he did, a chill ran down his genetically enhanced spine. The humans had moved into what Zephyrian naval doctrine called a delaying formation, a tactical arrangement designed not to win a battle, but to inflict maximum damage while retreating in good order. But that wasn't what concerned him. What concerned him was that their formation was nearly identical to one described in classified Zephyrian military manuals, a formation that was considered advanced tactical doctrine even by imperial standards. "How do they know that formation?" he asked quietly. "My lord?" Zilthek looked confused. "That positioning. It's a standard imperial delaying formation, modified for their ship types and capabilities. How does a primitive species know advanced Zephyrian naval tactics?" The question hung in the air like a poison cloud. Science Officer Kielandro was the first to offer an explanation. "Perhaps parallel development, my lord? There are only so many optimal ways to position vessels for combat." But Vextera was no longer convinced this was a coincidence. His enhanced intellect, modified over generations for strategic thinking, was beginning to process implications that he didn't like. Nyxvera analyzed their communications patterns. "I want to know everything about how they transmit data between ships." "Already running analysis, my lord." "Their communications are surprisingly sophisticated for their technological level. Multiple redundant channels, quantum entanglement communication for instantaneous coordination, and their encryption." She paused, her enhanced neural processors working at maximum capacity. "My lord, their encryption is not primitive. It's different from ours, but it shows mathematical sophistication equal to our own." The bridge was quiet except for the humming of electronics and the distant vibration of the ship's massive engines. Vextera felt something he had never experienced before in his centuries of life: uncertainty. Everything about these humans suggested they should be a minor primitive species, easily overwhelmed and absorbed into the Empire. Yet every tactical detail suggested otherwise. "Send another transmission," he ordered. "Inform them that they are outgunned and outnumbered. Surrender now and they will be treated according to imperial law governing primitive species." This time, the response came back almost instantly: negative. "Your fleet will withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Tyklef laughed, though there was less amusement in it than before. "The consequences? My lord, they must be insane. Shall I proceed with the demonstration?" Vextera stared at the tactical display, his mind working furiously. 3 small ships against 12 capital vessels. Primitive technology against imperial engineering. By every rational calculation, this should be over in seconds. Yet something nagged at him, some detail he couldn't quite identify. "What kind of species," he asked slowly, "sends a survey mission into unknown space with only 3 ships?" "An overconfident one," suggested Zilthek. "Or," Kielandro said quietly, "one that believes 3 ships are sufficient for the mission." The implication hung in the air. What kind of species would send only 3 ships unless they believed those 3 ships could handle anything they might encounter? "My lord," Nyxvera called urgently, "I'm detecting additional transmissions from the human vessels. They appear to be sending detailed tactical information to somewhere else. Heavily encrypted, but the transmission power suggests very long range." Vextera felt his blood turn cold. "They're calling for reinforcements?" "Unknown, my lord." But, the transmission patterns suggest they are reporting our presence to some kind of command structure. The tactical situation had just changed dramatically. What Vexthera had assumed was a simple first contact scenario with a primitive species was beginning to look like something far more complex. If these were military scouts with the ability to call for backup, then, destroying them might provoke a larger conflict with an unknown enemy. On the other hand, allowing them to continue their reconnaissance might provide valuable intelligence to that same unknown enemy. Time to transmission completion? Approximately 4 minutes, my lord. Vexthera made his decision. All ships, combat formation. Charge primary weapons but do not lock onto targets. We will demonstrate our superiority and give them one final chance to surrender before we destroy their ability to communicate with their homeland. The Zephyrian fleet shifted smoothly into attack formation, 12 capital ships and their escorts arranging themselves in the classical Hammer of Empire pattern that had shattered resistance across the galaxy. Energy readings spiked as weapons systems came online, enough firepower to devastate planets focusing on 3 small ships. The human response was immediate and professional. Their ships adjusted position slightly, maintaining their formation while presenting the smallest possible target profiles. No panic, no desperate maneuvering, just calm professional adjustment to a changed tactical situation. They're good, Zilthek admitted reluctantly. Disciplined, at least. Yes, Vexthera agreed, though his unease was growing. Too good for a primitive species encountering superior technology for the first time. Too calm. The final transmission from Commander Chen arrived just as the human ships finished their repositioning. Unknown fleet, you have made a serious mistake. This system is under the protection of the United Earth Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal before you are classified as hostile invaders. Tykeletha's enhanced reflexes were already targeting the human ships. My lord, they're still ordering us to withdraw. Permission to demonstrate the futility of their position? Vexthera stared at the display, his strategic mind racing through possibilities. Something was wrong with this entire situation. 3 ships did not challenge 12 without reason. Primitive species did not maintain such perfect discipline when facing overwhelming force. Military scouts did not operate alone unless they were confident in their ability to handle any situation. Unless they weren't alone. Nixvera, he commanded urgently, full sensor sweep of this system. Everything. I want to know about every asteroid, every piece of debris, every anomalous energy reading. Already scanning, my lord. I'm detecting, wait. Her voice changed, taking on a note of professional alarm. My lord, there are additional energy signatures throughout the system. Very faint, almost impossible to detect unless you know what to look for. Stealth ships? Unknown, my lord. The signatures are unlike anything in our databases. But there are many of them. Vexthera felt the universe shift around him as understanding dawned. This wasn't first contact with a primitive species. This was first contact with an unknown military force that had been watching them the entire time. The 3 ships weren't scouts. They were bait. How many? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. Nixvera's hands flew over her console, her enhanced processing power working to identify the faint signatures scattered throughout the system. Difficult to calculate precisely, my lord, but preliminary estimates suggest at least 40 vessels. Possibly more. The bridge fell silent except for the increasingly urgent beeping of sensor alarms. Vexthera realized that his tactical situation had just reversed completely. Instead of 12 ships surprising 3, it appeared that 40 or more ships had been watching 12. My lord, Zilthek said quietly, orders? Vexthera continued staring at the display, his mind reeling from the implications. If these humans had been monitoring the Zephyrian fleet from the moment they entered the system, then they knew everything about Zephyrian ships, weapons, and tactics. They had probably been recording and analyzing every transmission, every sensor sweep, every tactical decision. The 3 ships in front of them weren't just bait. They were a test. A test to see how the Zephyrian Empire would react to first contact. And Vexthera had the growing, horrible suspicion that his fleet had just failed that test catastrophically. Signal the fleet, he commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos in his thoughts. Maintain combat formation but do not fire unless fired upon. Open a priority channel to High Command. Inform them that we have encountered an unknown military force of significant size and capability. And the humans, my lord? Vexthera looked at the three ships still holding their perfect formation, still radiating calm professional confidence despite being outnumbered and outgunned. Or what he had thought was outnumbered and outgunned. Send a message to Commander Chen, he said slowly. Inform her that the Zephyrian Empire wishes to discuss terms for peaceful withdrawal from this system. The admission that the mighty Zephyrian Empire was requesting permission to leave hung in the air like an admission of defeat. But, as sensor alarms continued to sound and the true scope of the human presence in the system became clear, Vexthera realized that pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. Somewhere in the darkness around them, an unknown military force was watching and waiting. And, for the first time in his long life, Lord Commander Vexthera of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet was afraid. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Pathfinder, watching the alien fleet maintain their combat formation while her tactical officer continuously updated the threat assessment. The aliens had impressive ships, she had to give them that. Their technology was clearly advanced, their formations textbook perfect, and their discipline excellent. Under normal circumstances, 3 Earth reconnaissance ships would have been completely outmatched. These were not normal circumstances. Status report, Martinez, she requested calmly, not taking her eyes off the massive alien vessels displayed on the main screen. Lieutenant Commander Martinez, her tactical officer, looked up from his console with a slight smile. All Ghost Squadron ships are in position and ready, ma'am. The aliens still haven't detected our stealth platforms. Range to enemy fleet is optimal for missile engagement. Chen nodded slowly. The United Earth Defense Force had learned hard lessons during humanity's expansion into space. The galaxy was dangerous, filled with aggressive species and territorial disputes. Earth's response had been to develop military doctrine based on a simple principle: never fight fair if you can avoid it. Communications from the alien fleet, Commander, reported Ensign Park from the communications station. They're requesting permission to withdraw from the system. Chen raised an eyebrow. That's a significant change in attitude. What's our intelligence assessment of their capabilities? Impressive but conventional, Martinez responded, pulling up detailed scans of the alien vessels. Energy-based weapons, particle shields, advanced propulsion systems. Their technology is probably equivalent to our own, maybe slightly more advanced in some areas. Under normal fleet engagement parameters, they would have a significant advantage in firepower and defense. But, these aren't normal fleet engagement parameters, Chen observed. No, ma'am. Ghost Squadron stealth platforms give us tactical superiority despite their numerical and technological advantages. They can't fight what they can't see. Chen walked slowly around the bridge, her mind working through the implications of this first contact. The aliens had approached with obvious hostile intent, demanded surrender, and threatened military action. Their initial transmissions had identified them as an empire that expected immediate submission from any species they encountered. That suggested an aggressive, expansionist civilization with significant military experience. The fact that they were now requesting permission to withdraw indicated they had recognized the tactical situation they were actually in, which meant they were militarily competent enough to realize when they were outmatched. That was both good and bad news. Dr. Williams, she called to her science officer, what's your assessment of their behavior patterns? Dr. Williams looked up from his xenobiology console, where he had been analyzing the aliens' transmissions and ship designs. Fascinating, actually. Their initial approach was textbook imperial expansion, overwhelming force, demands for submission, threats of military action. But, their current behavior suggests rapid tactical adaptation. They recognized the changed situation and immediately shifted to diplomatic rather than military solutions. That suggests intelligence and flexibility, Chen mused. What about their social structure? Based on their transmissions and ship configurations, they appear to be a hierarchical society with significant technological advancement. Their leader identifies himself as Lord Commander, which suggests nobility or aristocracy. Their ships show evidence of advanced manufacturing and artistic design principles, which indicates a mature civilization with resources to devote to aesthetics as well as function. Chen processed this information. An intelligent, flexible, technologically advanced species with imperial ambitions and aristocratic social structures. Either potential allies or dangerous enemies, depending on how this first contact proceeded. "Ma'am," Ensign Park interrupted, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Hassan wants a full situation report." Chen sighed. She had known this moment would come. The reconnaissance mission had been intended to be routine, map unknown systems, identify potential resources or hazards, establish early warning networks for Earth's expanding frontier. Encountering an advanced alien civilization had not been part of the mission parameters. Put the Admiral through. Encrypt the channel. Admiral Hassan's face appeared on the private communications screen, his expression serious. "Commander Chen, I understand you've encountered an unknown alien force. What's your assessment?" 12 capital ships plus escorts, Admiral. Technologically advanced, militarily competent, initially hostile. They approached with Imperial expansion protocols and demanded our surrender. When they realized the tactical situation, they immediately requested permission to withdraw. Hassan's eyebrows rose. "They demanded your surrender? 3 ships against 12? "Yes, sir." Their behavior suggests they're accustomed to overwhelming primitive species with superior technology and firepower. When they discovered we're not primitive, they adapted quickly. Any indication of their overall military capabilities? Chen glanced at her tactical display. "Based on their ship configurations and formations, I estimate they represent a significant military force, probably with extensive expansion experience. However, their initial approach suggests they've never encountered effective resistance. They may not be prepared for symmetrical warfare." "Your recommendation, Commander?" Chen considered carefully. This moment would likely determine humanity's relationship with an entire alien civilization. The wrong decision could mean war with an advanced species, but the right decision could mean a valuable ally or at least peaceful coexistence. "I recommend cautious diplomatic engagement, Admiral. They've shown they're reasonable when faced with reality, but their imperial ambitions make them potentially dangerous. We should negotiate from our current position of strength while gathering intelligence about their overall capabilities and territorial extent." Hassan nodded slowly. "Agreed. You have authorization to conduct preliminary negotiations, but any territorial concessions or formal agreements must be approved by Earth Command. And, Commander, make sure they understand that what they've encountered is a routine reconnaissance force, not our primary military capability." The implication was clear. Let them know this was just the beginning. "Understood, Admiral." Chen out. As the communication ended, Chen turned back to her bridge crew. "All right, people. We're now conducting humanity's first formal diplomatic contact with an alien civilization. Let's make sure we get it right. Martinez, keep Ghost Squadron in position but have them dial back to minimum power signatures. I want them undetectable but ready for immediate action if needed." "Aye, ma'am." "Park, open a channel to the alien fleet. Let's see what they have to say." The main screen shifted to display the alien commander. He was tall and elegant, with pale blue skin marked by intricate silver patterns that seemed to shift and flow in the light. His features were elongated and refined, and his eyes held an intelligence that Chen found immediately impressive. This was no savage warrior or primitive tribal leader. This was a sophisticated military officer representing an advanced civilization. "Commander Chen," the alien said, his voice carrying formal courtesy with an undertone of wariness. "I am Lord Commander Vexthera of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. I believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding this system's territorial status." Chen smiled slightly. "Lord Commander. There has indeed been a misunderstanding. This system is under active survey by United Earth Forces as part of our ongoing expansion into this region of space. Your fleet's approach and demands for surrender were interpreted as hostile actions." "Our expansion?" Vexthera repeated, and Chen could see him processing the implications. Commander Chen, how extensive is this expansion? The United Earth Defense Force currently maintains active operations in 47 star systems, with survey missions extending into an additional 130 systems, Chen replied truthfully. It was a number designed to impress without revealing the full scope of human space. The alien commander was silent for a long moment, and Chen could see him calculating. 47 systems was larger than most species managed to control, and active survey operations in over 100 more suggested significant military and logistical capabilities. I see, Vexthera said finally. And, this reconnaissance force, how many vessels do you have in this system? Chen smiled. Enough, Lord Commander. Our doctrine emphasizes overwhelming tactical advantage rather than overwhelming force. We prefer to end conflicts quickly and, with minimal casualties. Another long pause. Chen could practically see the alien commander trying to assess just how badly outmatched his fleet was. The fact that Earthships had remained completely hidden until they chose to reveal themselves suggested technological capabilities that made Zephyrian stealth systems look primitive by comparison. Commander Chen, Vexthera said carefully, the Zephyrian Empire has had no prior contact with your species. We were unaware that this region was under United Earth authority. Perhaps we could discuss territorial boundaries and establish formal diplomatic relations? Chen nodded approvingly. The alien was handling the situation with admirable professionalism. That would be acceptable, Lord Commander. However, I should clarify that what you've encountered today is a routine reconnaissance operation. Our diplomatic and military leadership will need to be involved in any formal territorial discussions. She could see Vexthera absorbing the implication that this encounter involved only low-level Earth forces, not their primary military or political leadership. If a routine reconnaissance mission could outmatch a major Zephyrian fleet operation, what could Earth's actual military accomplish? Of course, Vexthera replied. Might I ask, how should formal diplomatic contact be established? Chen gestured to her communications officer. Ensign Park will provide you with diplomatic contact protocols and territorial charts for this region. I recommend your leadership contact our diplomatic corps through the channels we'll provide. They can arrange formal meetings in neutral space. Territorial charts? Vexthera asked, and Chen could hear the concern in his voice. Standard procedure, Lord Commander. Maps showing current Earth territorial claims, active survey regions, and neutral zones available for discussion. We find it prevents future misunderstandings like today's incident. Chen watched the alien commander's face as he realized that humanity had already mapped and claimed significant portions of local space. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't dealing with a primitive species they could easily conquer. They were dealing with an established power that had already staked territorial claims and had the military capability to enforce them. I see, Vexthera said slowly. Commander Chen, might I ask how long your species has been conducting expansion operations in this region? Earth's expansion has been ongoing for approximately 70 years, Chen replied. We found it's best to establish territorial claims and defensive positions early in any expansion phase. It prevents conflicts with neighboring species. 70 years. Chen could see the alien commander doing calculations. 70 years of systematic expansion, territorial claims, and military positioning. The Zephyrian Empire had stumbled into contact with a species that had been planning for exactly this kind of encounter for decades. Commander, Dr. Williams said quietly, I'm detecting significant electromagnetic activity from the alien fleet. They appear to be transmitting detailed reports to their home territory. Chen nodded. Good. She wanted the Zephyrian leadership to get a complete picture of what they were dealing with. The more information they had, the more likely they were to choose diplomatic rather than military solutions to territorial disputes. Lord Commander, she said, I'm transmitting the diplomatic protocols now. Your leadership should find our terms for territorial discussion reasonable. The United Earth government prefers peaceful coexistence with neighboring species, but we do require formal recognition of our territorial claims. Of course, Vexthera replied, though his voice carried a note of strain. Commander Chen, might I ask what would happen if a species were to dispute these territorial claims militarily? Shin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Earth's defensive doctrine is comprehensive, Lord Commander. We've found that overwhelming tactical response to territorial violations tends to discourage future incidents. Most species find diplomatic solutions preferable once they understand the alternatives. The threat was politely phrased but unmistakable. Species that challenged Earth militarily faced overwhelming tactical response. The implication was that other species had tried and failed. I understand completely, Vexthera said quickly. The Zephyrian Empire values diplomatic solutions. We will contact your diplomatic corps immediately to establish formal relations. Excellent, Chen replied. In the meantime, I recommend your fleet withdraw to a minimum distance of 100,000 kilometers while we complete our survey operations. This will prevent any additional misunderstandings. Of course. We will begin immediate withdrawal. Thank you for your patience with this unfortunate incident. Chen nodded graciously. First contacts are always complex, Lord Commander. The important thing is that both our species have handled this professionally. I look forward to formal diplomatic relations between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire. As the communication ended, Chen turned to her bridge crew. Well, people, I think that went about as well as we could hope. Martinez, keep Ghost Squadron in position until the aliens are well clear of the system. Park, make sure those diplomatic protocols include detailed territorial maps showing the full extent of our claims in this region. Aye, ma'am, both officers responded. Chen watched the alien fleet begin its withdrawal, noting the precision of their formations and the obvious quality of their ships. The Zephyrians were clearly a formidable species with advanced technology and military experience. Under other circumstances, they could have been a serious threat to Earth's expansion. Instead, they were now potential diplomatic partners who would spread word throughout their region of space that humanity was an established power with significant territorial claims and military capabilities. Other species would hear about this encounter and would approach future contact with Earth much more carefully. Dr. Williams, she called, what's your assessment of how they're likely to report this encounter to their leadership? Williams smiled. I suspect they'll describe contact with a previously unknown spacefaring species with extensive territorial claims, advanced stealth technology, superior tactical positioning, and professional military doctrine. They'll recommend immediate diplomatic engagement to establish peaceful relations. And the strategic implications? Earth has just announced its presence to what appears to be a major regional power. They'll share information about us with other species in their sphere of influence. Word will spread that humanity is an established power rather than an emerging species that can be easily conquered or intimidated. Shen nodded with satisfaction. This first contact had accomplished far more than a simple survey mission. It had established Earth's reputation as a serious military power and opened diplomatic channels with what appeared to be a significant alien civilization. Continue monitoring their withdrawal, she ordered. And prepare a detailed report for Earth Command. I suspect this encounter is going to have implications far beyond our current mission parameters. As she watched the Zephyrian fleet disappear into hyperspace, Chen couldn't help but smile. The aliens had expected to encounter a primitive species they could easily dominate. Instead, they had discovered that the galaxy had a new player, one that had been quietly establishing territorial claims and military positions while other species fought among themselves. The Zephyrian Empire would not forget this lesson. And neither would any of the other species they shared information with. Earth's expansion had just entered a new phase. Lord Commander Vexthera stood before the assembled High Council of the Zephyrian Empire, his formal uniform bearing the silver threads that denoted his recent encounter with an unknown species. The council chamber was a masterpiece of Zephyrian architecture, with crystalline walls that amplified the natural luminescence of the noble bloodlines and created an atmosphere of timeless power. Today, however, that atmosphere felt fragile. High Chancellor Kiwaxandra, her genetic modifications marking her as one of the founding bloodlines, studied the tactical hologram floating above the council table with an expression of growing concern. The hologram showed Vexthera's fleet in its combat formation, facing 3 small human vessels, while dozens of additional contacts flickered in and out of sensor range throughout the system. Let me understand this clearly, Lord Commander, she said, her voice carrying the enhanced vocal cords that allowed noble bloodlines to speak with perfect clarity and authority. Your fleet of 12 capital ships encountered 3 primitive vessels and requested permission to withdraw? Vexthera kept his expression neutral despite the implied criticism. High Chancellor, respectfully, the vessels were not primitive. Our initial assessment was incorrect. The humans possess stealth technology superior to our own, tactical doctrine equivalent to our military academies, and strategic positioning that demonstrated extensive military experience. Lord General Tyx Meridian, whose bloodline had been modified for strategic thinking and tactical analysis, leaned forward in his seat. You're suggesting that 3 ships presented a credible threat to the Southern Fleet? I'm suggesting, Lord General, that 3 ships were merely the visible component of a force that our sensors eventually identified as consisting of at least 40 vessels, possibly more. The humans had been monitoring our approach from the moment we entered the system. A murmur of concern passed through the assembled nobles. The idea that an unknown species could monitor Zephyrian movements without detection was deeply troubling. High Chancellor Kyxandra gestured, and the hologram shifted to display the transmission logs from the encounter. These humans, they claimed territorial authority over the system? They claimed territorial authority over 47 star systems, High Chancellor, with active survey operations in over 130 additional systems. They provided detailed territorial charts showing their claimed boundaries. The council chamber fell silent. 47 star systems represented a territory nearly half the size of the Zephyrian Empire itself. The implications were staggering. Lord Admiral Nyx Caliph, whose bloodline modifications had enhanced his ability to process complex spatial relationships, activated additional displays showing the territorial charts provided by the humans. If these claims are accurate, he said slowly, then, this United Earth government controls a territory that directly borders 17 of our outer systems. How is this possible? Demanded Lord General Tyx Meridian. Our exploration fleets have mapped this region extensively. There have been no signs of advanced civilization. Vexthera activated another display, showing comparative technology assessments. Our analysis suggests they possess stealth capabilities far beyond our current technology. Their ships were invisible to our sensors until they chose to reveal themselves. It's possible they have been observing our expansion for years without our knowledge. The implications sent a chill through the assembled nobles. If the humans had been watching Zephyrian expansion, they would know everything about Imperial military capabilities, territorial boundaries, and strategic weaknesses. High Chancellor Kyxandra studied the territorial charts with growing alarm. These boundaries, they completely surround several of our outer systems. If they chose to enforce these claims militarily, our outer worlds would be cut off from Imperial support, Lord Admiral Nyx Caliph finished grimly. They've positioned themselves to control the primary hyperspace routes between our core systems and our frontier territories. Lord General Tyx Meridian stood and began pacing, his enhanced cognitive abilities working furiously to process the strategic implications. This cannot be coincidental. These boundary claims are too precise, too strategically positioned. They've been studying our empire's structure and specifically positioned themselves to maximize their strategic advantage. Agreed, said Vexthera. Their negotiator, Commander Chen, demonstrated detailed knowledge of diplomatic protocols and territorial law. When I attempted to assess their military capabilities, she made it clear that what we encountered was described as a routine reconnaissance operation and that formal diplomatic discussions would involve their primary leadership. Routine reconnaissance, repeated High Chancellor Kyxandra slowly. They outmaneuvered a major fleet operation with routine reconnaissance. The chamber fell quiet as the nobles contemplated the implications. If humanity's routine operations could match Zephyrian military capability, what could their actual military forces accomplish? Lord Science Minister Qyl Vanthi, whose bloodline modifications had enhanced his analytical capabilities, had been quietly studying the technical data from the encounter. Lord Commander, these humans, did they demonstrate any of their advanced technology directly? No, Lord Minister. They relied entirely on tactical positioning and superior intelligence gathering. We never saw their weapons capabilities, their defensive systems, or their primary technological advantages. They achieved complete tactical superiority through stealth and positioning alone. Professional, observed Lord General Tyx Meridian. They revealed only enough to establish dominance while concealing their actual capabilities. That suggests extensive military experience and sophisticated strategic doctrine. High Chancellor Kyxandra activated her personal communication system and gestured for privacy shields to activate around the council table. This discussion must remain classified until we determine our response. The implications for the Empire are significant. She turned to address the full council. We are faced with a previously unknown spacefaring civilization that has established territorial claims throughout our frontier, possesses military capabilities that may exceed our own, and has been observing our expansion for an unknown period of time. Our response will determine whether this represents an opportunity for alliance or a threat to imperial survival. Lord Admiral Nix Caliph brought up strategic displays showing Zephyrian military positions. High Chancellor, our current fleet deployments assume control of the hyperspace routes in the frontier sectors. If the humans enforce their territorial claims, we would lose strategic mobility and be unable to respond effectively to threats on our borders. What are their diplomatic demands? Asked Lord General Tyx Meridian. Vexthera consulted his records. They've requested formal diplomatic contact through their diplomatic corps. They emphasized preference for peaceful coexistence but required formal recognition of their territorial claims. They also made it clear that military challenges to their territory would result in what they called overwhelming tactical response. Threats? Politely phrased, but unmistakable. They indicated that other species had attempted military challenges and found diplomatic solutions preferable after understanding the alternatives. The council exchanged glances. The humans were claiming to have defeated other species in territorial conflicts, which suggested extensive military experience and successful track record. High Chancellor Kyxandra made her decision. Lord Commander Vexthera, you will return to the frontier with a diplomatic mission rather than a military one. I want complete information about human capabilities, territorial extent, and strategic intentions. Use whatever resources necessary to gather intelligence. Lord Admiral Nix Caliph, I want complete analysis of our strategic position assuming the humans enforce their territorial claims. Identify vulnerabilities and develop contingency plans for defense of our core systems. Lord General Tyx Meridian, review our military doctrine assuming conflicts with enemies possessing superior stealth capabilities and tactical intelligence. We need to understand how to fight an enemy we cannot see. Lord Science Minister Qyl Vanthi, I want crash programs to develop countermeasures for stealth technology and improve our sensor capabilities. If the humans can hide from our detection, other species may possess similar capabilities. The nobles acknowledged their orders, but High Chancellor Kyxandra could see the concern in their expressions. For the first time in centuries, the Zephyrian Empire faced a potential peer competitor rather than a primitive species they could easily dominate. There is another consideration, Lord Science Minister Qyl Vanthi said quietly. If the humans have been observing our expansion for years, they may know about our other frontier encounters. They may be aware of our standard protocols for dealing with primitive species. The implication was clear. If the humans had been watching, they would know about the Zephyrian Empire's history of forced conquest and subjugation of weaker species. That knowledge would shape their strategic planning and diplomatic position. They may see us as a threat, observed Lord General Tyx Meridian. An aggressive, expansionist empire that forces weaker species into submission. From their perspective, we may represent the exact kind of threat their military doctrine is designed to counter. High Chancellor Kyxandra felt a chill as she realized the full scope of their strategic predicament. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power through technological superiority and overwhelming force against primitive species. Now they faced a species that had been studying their methods and developing countermeasures. How many species have we subjugated in the frontier sectors? She asked quietly. 17 species across 23 systems, Lord Admiral Nix Caliph replied. All primitive civilizations that were integrated into imperial structure as vassal states. And if the humans have been watching our expansion, they would interpret our history as evidence of aggressive imperial expansion through force, finished Lord General Tyx Meridian. They would position themselves as a defensive barrier against further Zephyrian expansion. The strategic situation was becoming clearer, and it was far worse than any of them had initially realized. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't just facing a potential territorial dispute with an unknown species. They were facing a species that had deliberately positioned itself to contain imperial expansion and had been preparing for exactly this confrontation. Lord Commander, High Chancellor Kawayexandra said slowly, when you return for diplomatic contact, you will make it clear that the Zephyrian Empire seeks peaceful coexistence and has no territorial ambitions in regions under human authority. You will also subtly assess whether they have been in contact with any of our vassal species. The possibility that the humans had been encouraging rebellion among Zephyrian vassal species added another layer of complexity to an already dangerous situation. High Chancellor, Vexthera said carefully, there is one additional consideration. During our encounter, the humans mentioned that their expansion had been ongoing for 70 years. If they have been systematically establishing territorial claims and military positions throughout this region for 7 decades, they've had time to build alliances with multiple species, Lord Admiral Nixcalith realized. Our territorial disputes may not be with humanity alone, but with a coalition of species under human leadership. The chamber fell silent as the full implications became clear. The Zephyrian Empire had stumbled into contact not with a single unknown species, but potentially with an organized coalition that had been preparing to contain imperial expansion for decades. Begin immediate implementation of all assigned projects, High Chancellor Kawayexandra ordered. And prepare contingency plans for the possibility that our frontier territories are no longer defensible. We may need to consolidate our positions in the core systems while we assess the full scope of this situation. As the council dispersed to begin their urgent preparations, High Chancellor Kawayexandra remained at the table studying the territorial charts provided by the humans. For centuries, the Zephyrian Empire had been the dominant power in their region of space, expanding steadily and absorbing weaker species into their imperial structure. Now, for the first time, they faced the possibility that their expansion was over and their empire was under threat from a coalition they had never seen coming. The worst part was the growing realization that this confrontation had been inevitable. An aggressive, expansionist empire would eventually encounter organized resistance. The humans had simply been better prepared for that encounter than the Zephyrians had imagined possible. As she studied the strategic displays showing Zephyrian positions surrounded by human territorial claims, High Chancellor Kawayexandra couldn't shake the feeling that the empire was about to face the greatest challenge in its history. And they might already be losing. 3 weeks after the initial encounter, Lord Commander Vexthera found himself aboard a modified diplomatic vessel approaching the coordinates provided by the human diplomatic corps. The ship was smaller than his usual flagship, deliberately chosen to appear non-threatening, but it carried the most advanced sensors and communication equipment the Zephyrian Empire could provide. His mission was information gathering, and High Chancellor Kawayexandra had made it clear that the survival of the Empire might depend on what he learned. The meeting point was a neutral system approximately halfway between human and Zephyrian territorial claims. As his ship dropped out of hyperspace, Vexthera's enhanced senses immediately detected something that made his blood run cold. The system wasn't empty. Sub-Commander, he called to his sensor operator, report. My lord, detecting multiple vessels throughout the system. Large ships, maintaining what appears to be a security perimeter around a central facility. I count, at least 30 vessels, possibly more. Vexthera studied the tactical display with growing unease. The human ships were arranged in a perfect defensive formation around what appeared to be a massive space station. Each ship was easily the size of a Zephyrian capital vessel, and their positioning demonstrated the kind of tactical sophistication that had become disturbingly familiar. That's not a diplomatic meeting, observed Sub-Commander Zilfek nervously. That's a show of force. No, Vexthera corrected, studying the formation more carefully. It's a demonstration. They want us to see their capabilities. An incoming transmission interrupted his analysis. The main screen activated to show a human female in an elaborate uniform that indicated high rank. Her features showed the confidence that came with authority, and her bearing suggested extensive military experience. Lord Commander Vexthera, she said with formal courtesy, I am Admiral Sarah Hassan of the United Earth Defense Force. Welcome to Diplomatic Station Alpha. Please follow the navigational beacon to the assigned docking bay. Vextheron noted the title. Admiral, not Commander. The humans had sent someone of significantly higher rank than the reconnaissance officer he had encountered previously. That could mean respect, or it could mean they considered this situation important enough to warrant senior leadership involvement. Admiral Hassan, he replied formally, the Zephyrian Empire is honored by your reception. We appreciate the opportunity for formal diplomatic contact. Of course, Lord Commander. I think you'll find our discussions illuminating. As his ship followed the beacon toward the station, Vexthera couldn't help but study the human vessels they passed. Each ship was unique in design, suggesting different purposes or manufacturers, but all shared the angular, functional aesthetic he had observed in the reconnaissance vessels. More importantly, each ship radiated the kind of energy signatures that indicated they were fully armed and ready for combat. The space station itself was enormous, easily rivaling the largest Zephyrian orbital facilities. Its construction showed the same functional design philosophy as the ships, but on a massive scale. Multiple docking bays, defensive platforms, and what appeared to be construction facilities suggested this was far more than a simple meeting place. My lord, Sub-Commander Zilthek said quietly, that station, it's not just for diplomacy. Those are military construction bays, research facilities, and fleet support infrastructure. Vextheron nodded grimly. The humans weren't just claiming territory, they were building the infrastructure to defend and develop it. The scale of construction suggested they had been working on this project for years, possibly decades. As his ship docked, Vexthera prepared himself for what he suspected would be the most important diplomatic meeting in Zephyrian history. The humans had demonstrated overwhelming tactical capability, extensive territorial claims, and now impressive infrastructure development. Each revelation had been more concerning than the last. The docking bay was spacious and well-organized, with clear signs of advanced technology and efficient design. Human personnel moved with the kind of professional competence he had come to associate with their military, but these were clearly diplomatic and technical staff rather than combat troops. Admiral Hassan was waiting for him at the airlock, accompanied by a small diplomatic entourage. She was older than Commander Chen, with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in military leadership. Her uniform bore insignia that Vexthera's cultural briefings identified as indicating very senior rank in the human military hierarchy. Lord Commander, she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Welcome aboard Diplomatic Station Alpha. I hope your journey was comfortable. Vexthera accepted the handshake, noting the firm grip that suggested confidence and strength. Admiral Hassan. The journey was indeed comfortable. Your station is impressive. Hassan smiled. Thank you. We've found that proper diplomatic facilities help prevent misunderstandings. Shall we proceed to the conference room? I believe we have much to discuss. As they walked through the station's corridors, Vexthera observed everything with his enhanced senses. The construction was solid and functional, built to last. The corridors were wide enough to accommodate large groups or equipment movement. Most telling, there were clear signs of military-grade defensive systems integrated into the station's structure. The conference room was elegant but practical, with a large holographic display capable of showing star charts and tactical information. The table was arranged for formal negotiations, and Vexthera noted that the human delegation included military officers, diplomatic specialists, and what appeared to be intelligence analysts. Before we begin formal discussions, Admiral Hassan said as they took their seats, I'd like to clarify the scope of our respective authorities. I am authorized to negotiate preliminary agreements regarding territorial boundaries and trade relationships. Any formal treaties would require approval from the United Earth Government's Parliamentary Council. Vexthera nodded. I am similarly authorized to negotiate preliminary agreements on behalf of the Zephyrian Empire, subject to approval by the High Council. Excellent. Then, let's begin with territorial boundaries. Hassan activated the holographic display, showing a detailed three-dimensional map of the local region. These are the current territorial claims of the United Earth Government. The display showed a vast region of space with clearly marked boundaries, trade routes, and defensive positions. What shocked Vexthera was the scope. The human territory was not just the 47 systems Commander Chen had mentioned, but a vast network of claimed space that included resource rights, military patrol zones, and exclusive economic development regions. Your territorial claims are extensive, he observed carefully. Earth's expansion has been systematic and comprehensive, Hassan replied. We found that clearly defined territorial boundaries prevent conflicts with neighboring species. As you can see, we've established buffer zones around our core systems and exclusive development rights in resource-rich regions. Vexthera studied the display more carefully and felt his enhanced cognitive abilities processing implications that he didn't like. The human territorial claims effectively surrounded several Zephyrian frontier systems and controlled the primary hyperspace routes between the Zephyrian core systems and their outer territories. I noticed that your claims appear to surround several systems currently under Zephyrian authority, he said diplomatically. Yes, Hassan replied without apparent concern. Those systems are within Earth's claimed security perimeter. However, we're prepared to discuss special administrative arrangements for existing Zephyrian settlements. The phrase special administrative arrangements was diplomatically polite, but the implication was clear: the humans considered those systems to be within their territory, and any Zephyrian presence would be subject to human authority. What kind of arrangements? Vexthera asked. Hassan activated another display showing comparative territorial maps. Earth recognizes that territorial transitions can be complex when they involve existing populations. We're prepared to offer 50-year transition periods for Zephyrian settlements, during which time they would maintain local autonomy while gradually integrating into Earth's administrative structure. Vexthera felt his enhanced intellect working furiously to understand the full implications. The humans were offering to let the Zephyrian Empire maintain control of their frontier systems for 50 years, after which those systems would become part of human territory. It was a peaceful annexation proposal disguised as a diplomatic compromise. And if the Zephyrian Empire objects to this arrangement? Hassan's expression didn't change, but her voice took on a subtle edge. Earth's territorial claims have been established through 70 years of systematic exploration, resource development, and infrastructure construction. We're prepared to defend those claims if necessary. However, we strongly prefer diplomatic solutions. The threat was politely delivered, but unmistakable. The humans would fight for their territorial claims if diplomacy failed, and they believed they could win such a conflict. Perhaps we could discuss the basis for these territorial claims, Vexthera suggested. In Zephyrian law, territorial authority derives from effective occupation and development. An excellent principle, Hassan agreed. Earth's territorial claims are based on exactly that standard. She activated another display showing detailed development projects throughout human space. As you can see, we've established permanent installations, resource extraction operations, defensive platforms, and civilian settlements throughout our claimed territory. Vexthera studied the display with growing alarm. The humans hadn't just claimed territory, they had built extensive infrastructure to support those claims. Mining operations, agricultural settlements, military bases, and industrial facilities dotted their territorial map. The scope of development suggested they had been working on this expansion for decades. This level of development, he said slowly, represents enormous investment in resources and personnel. Earth's expansion has been our primary focus for several decades, Hassan confirmed. We've found that rapid development and infrastructure construction helps establish clear territorial authority while providing economic benefits for our population. How large is Earth's population? Vexthera asked, though he dreaded the answer. Hassan smiled. Approximately 12 billion in our core systems, with another 4 billion in our frontier territories. Our demographic projections suggest continued population growth will require additional territorial expansion over the next several decades. 16 billion humans, with continuing population growth requiring more territory. The Zephyrian Empire's total population was approximately 8 billion across their 12 core systems and frontier territories. The humans outnumbered them 2-1 and were actively expanding to accommodate population growth. I see, Vexthera said, trying to process the strategic implications. And your military capabilities, are they proportional to your population? Earth maintains sufficient military forces to protect our territory and population, Hassan replied diplomatically. Our military doctrine emphasizes technological superiority and tactical efficiency rather than overwhelming numbers. We prefer to end conflicts quickly with minimal casualties. Vexthera remembered Commander Chen's demonstration of that tactical efficiency. The humans had achieved complete tactical superiority over a major Zephyrian fleet operation using only their reconnaissance forces. If their doctrine emphasized efficiency over numbers, their actual military capabilities were probably far beyond what they had already demonstrated. Admiral Hassan, he said carefully, might I ask about Earth's relationships with other species in this region? Hassan activated another display showing a complex web of diplomatic relationships. Earth maintains formal diplomatic relations with 23 species, mutual defense agreements with 12 allied species, and trade partnerships with 37 different civilizations. We've found that strong diplomatic networks help maintain regional stability. Vexthera stared at the display in shock. The humans had formal diplomatic relationships with more species than the Zephyrian Empire had ever encountered. They had built a coalition of allies and trading partners that covered most of the local region. The Zephyrians weren't facing a single unknown species, they were facing an established diplomatic and military coalition. These mutual defense agreements, he asked quietly, do they involve territorial disputes? Our allies can request assistance if their territory is threatened by aggressive expansion from hostile species, Hassan confirmed. Earth takes its alliance commitments very seriously. The implication was clear. Any military action by the Zephyrian Empire against human territorial claims might trigger defensive responses from multiple allied species. The tactical situation was even worse than the High Council had feared. I'm beginning to understand the scope of Earth's position in this region, Vexthera said slowly. Might I ask, what role does the Zephyrian Empire play in your strategic planning? Hassan leaned back in her chair, studying him with the expression of someone making an important decision. Lord Commander, I'm going to be direct with you because I believe the Zephyrian Empire deserves an honest assessment of your situation. She activated a new display showing Zephyrian territorial holdings surrounded by human claims and allied territory. Earth's intelligence services have been monitoring Zephyrian expansion for approximately 40 years. We're familiar with your imperial structure, your expansion methods, and your treatment of conquered species. Vexthera felt his blood turn cold. 40 years of observation meant the humans knew everything about Zephyrian military capabilities, political structure, and strategic weaknesses. From Earth's perspective, Hassan continued, the Zephyrian Empire represents a classical aggressive expansion scenario that our defensive doctrine is specifically designed to counter. Your empire forces primitive species into submission through technological superiority and overwhelming force. Eventually, that expansion would bring you into conflict with Earth's territorial claims and allied species. So you positioned yourselves to contain our expansion, Vexthera realized. Earth positioned ourselves to defend our territory and our allies from aggressive imperial expansion, Hassan corrected. Your recent encounter with Commander Chen was not accidental. We've been monitoring your fleet movements and were prepared for eventual contact. The full scope of the strategic situation became clear to Vexthera. The humans had been studying the Zephyrian Empire for decades, building alliances with species in the region, and positioning themselves to contain imperial expansion. The encounter with Commander Chen had been a carefully planned demonstration designed to show the Zephyrians exactly what they were facing. What are Earth's intentions regarding the Zephyrian Empire? He asked directly. Hassan smiled, but it was not entirely friendly. Earth prefers peaceful coexistence with all neighboring species. However, we will not tolerate aggressive expansion that threatens our territory or our allies. The choice of how this relationship develops is largely up to the Zephyrian Empire. The message was clear. The humans were offering the Zephyrians a choice, peaceful coexistence within their current borders, or conflict with a coalition they could not hope to defeat. Vexthera realized that he was not conducting diplomatic negotiations. He was receiving terms for surrender disguised as diplomatic courtesy. The Zephyrian Empire's expansion was over, and their survival depended on accepting human authority in regional affairs. The only question was whether the High Council would accept reality, or whether they would choose a war they could not win. 6 months after Lord Commander Vexthera's diplomatic mission, High Chancellor HFY Andra stood before an emergency session of the full Imperial Council in the deepest chambers of the Zephyrian capital world. The chamber, carved from crystalline formations that had taken millennia to grow, had witnessed the rise of the Empire from a single world to a 12-system domain. Today, it would witness decisions that would determine whether that empire would continue to exist. The holographic displays surrounding the chamber showed strategic assessments that painted a picture of complete strategic encirclement. Human territorial claims, backed by their coalition allies, surrounded Zephyrian space on 3 sides. Intelligence reports indicated massive human military buildup along their borders, while intercepted communications suggested that several Zephyrian vassal species were in secret negotiations with Earth's diplomatic representatives. Members of the Council, High Chancellor HFY Andra began, her enhanced vocal cords carrying clearly through the vast chamber, "We face the gravest crisis in Imperial history. Our expansion has encountered organized resistance that we were not prepared for." Lord General TYX Meridian activated the primary tactical display, showing force comparisons that made even the most genetically enhanced nobles feel cold. The strategic analysis is clear. Earth commands a coalition of 23 allied species with combined military forces approximately 10 times our own capability. Their technology appears roughly equivalent to ours, but their tactical doctrine and intelligence advantages make direct military confrontation inadvisable. Inadvisable? Lord Admiral Nix Calitha's voice carried the edge that marked his bloodline's genetic modifications for aggressive behavior. "You're recommending surrender to primitives who achieved spaceflight only centuries ago?" "I'm recommending survival," TYX Meridian replied coldly. "The humans have been monitoring our expansion for 40 years. They know our capabilities, our strategic positions, our political structure, and our military doctrine. Meanwhile, we know almost nothing about their actual military capabilities beyond the demonstrations they've chosen to show us." Lord Science Minister QYL Vanthi brought up additional displays showing technological assessments. "Our analysis of the limited human technology we've observed indicates capabilities that surpass our own in several critical areas. Their stealth technology remains undetectable by our sensors. Their tactical coordination suggests communication systems that operate faster than our own. Their intelligence-gathering capabilities allowed them to monitor us for decades without detection. More importantly," added Lord Intelligence Director NYM Valkra, "her neural modifications allowing her to process vast amounts of data simultaneously, our infiltration attempts into human space have been completely unsuccessful. Every probe we've sent has been detected and intercepted. We cannot gather intelligence about their true capabilities." High Chancellor HFY Andra studied the faces of the assembled nobles, seeing the conflict between their genetically enhanced arrogance and their intellectual understanding of the strategic situation. The Zephyrian bloodlines had been modified for confidence and leadership, but those same modifications made it difficult to accept subordinate positions. "Lord Commander Vexthera," she said, "provide the Council with your assessment of human intentions." Vexthera stood, his bearing reflecting the weight of the knowledge he had gained during his diplomatic mission. "The humans view the Zephyrian Empire as an aggressive threat that must be contained. They have positioned themselves and their allies to prevent any further imperial expansion. They are offering us a choice: peaceful coexistence within our current borders, or military confrontation with a coalition that outnumbers us 10 to 1. "What are the specific terms?" asked Lord Economic Minister ZYX Nades. "Formal recognition of human territorial claims in disputed systems. Cessation of expansion activities beyond current imperial borders. Integration into Earth's regional diplomatic structure as a junior partner. Gradual transition of our vassal species to autonomous status under human protection." The chamber erupted in outraged voices. The idea of the mighty Zephyrian Empire accepting junior partner status with any species was almost incomprehensible to the noble bloodlines. "This is intolerable," declared Lord Admiral Nix Calith. "The Empire has never bowed to external authority. We will fight before we accept such humiliation." "With what?" Lord General TYX Meridian challenged. "We have 12 capital ships. Our intelligence estimates suggest the human coalition commands over 400 capital-class vessels, supported by thousands of smaller ships and extensive defensive infrastructure. How do you propose to fight a war we cannot win?" High Chancellor Kyxandra called for order, but she could see the fundamental problem facing the empire. The Zephyrian noble bloodlines had been genetically modified for leadership and dominance. Accepting subordinate status violated everything their genetic programming told them was natural and correct. There is another consideration, Lord Intelligence Director NYM Valkyra said quietly. Our monitoring of communications traffic suggests that several of our vassal species have been in contact with human diplomatic representatives. The humans are offering them autonomous status and protection from imperial authority. The implication sent a chill through the assembled nobles. If their vassal species rebelled with human support, the empire would face internal revolt in addition to external threats. How many species? High Chancellor Kyxandra asked, though she dreaded the answer. At least 12 of the 17 vassal species show indicators of potential rebellion. The humans appear to be offering them everything they would need to successfully revolt: military protection, economic support, and diplomatic recognition. Lord Economic Minister ZYX Nades activated economic projections that painted an even bleaker picture. Loss of our vassal species would reduce imperial economic capacity by 60%. We would lose access to most of our strategic resources and much of our agricultural production. The core systems alone could not sustain current population levels. The strategic picture was becoming clear, and it was catastrophic. The Zephyrian Empire faced external military pressure they could not resist, internal rebellion they could not suppress, and economic collapse they could not prevent. The humans had positioned themselves to destroy the empire without firing a shot. How did this happen? Demanded Lord Admiral Nix Caliph. How did we fail to detect such a massive threat? Lord Science Minister Qyl Vanthi provided the answer that none of them wanted to hear. We failed to detect it because the humans designed their expansion specifically to remain undetectable until they were ready to reveal themselves. They used stealth technology, gradual territorial claims, and diplomatic rather than military expansion. By the time they revealed their presence, they had already achieved strategic dominance. They studied us, Vexthara added. For 40 years, they observed our expansion methods, our military capabilities, and our treatment of conquered species. They built their entire strategy around countering our specific approach to empire building. High Chancellor Kyxandra felt the weight of leadership as she realized the full scope of the decision facing them. The Zephyrian Empire could choose humiliating survival or glorious destruction. There was no third option. Members of the Council, she said formally, we must choose. Do we accept the human terms and preserve the empire in diminished form, or do we fight a war that we cannot win but which would preserve our honor? The debate that followed revealed the fundamental divide within the imperial leadership. The older nobles, whose genetic modifications emphasized strategic thinking, increasingly favored accepting reality and negotiating the best possible terms for survival. The younger nobles, whose bloodlines had been modified for aggression and dominance, favored military resistance regardless of the consequences. Lord General Tyx Meridian provided the military assessment that ultimately decided the debate. If we choose war, we will lose. The only question is how much of the empire survives. If we accept the human terms now, we preserve the core systems and most of our population. If we fight, we risk complete destruction. But we will fight as Zephyrians, Lord Admiral Nix Caliph declared. Our bloodlines were created to lead, not to serve. Our bloodlines were created to preserve the empire, High Chancellor Kyxandra corrected. And sometimes preservation requires adaptation. The vote, when it came, was close, 12 in favor of accepting the human terms, 10 in favor of military resistance. The margin was narrow, but the decision was final. Lord Commander Vexthara, High Chancellor Kyxandra ordered, you will return to the humans with our acceptance of their terms. Negotiate the best possible arrangement for the transition. As the council session ended, High Chancellor Kyxandra remained in the chamber, studying the strategic displays that showed the end of Zephyrian expansion and the beginning of a new era. The empire would survive, but it would never again be the dominant power in its region of space. 6 weeks later, Lord Commander Vexthara stood on the observation deck of Diplomatic Station Alpha, watching the formal signing ceremony that would reshape the political structure of the local region. The Zephyrian Empire had accepted status as a junior member of Earth's regional coalition, with guarantees of territorial integrity for their core systems in exchange for abandoning all expansion activities and transitioning their vassal species to autonomous status. Admiral Hassan joined him at the observation window, her expression reflecting professional satisfaction rather than triumph. "Your empire made the right choice, Lord Commander. This arrangement preserves your people while establishing regional stability." Vextheron nodded slowly, though the genetic modifications that made him a Zephyrian noble still rebelled against accepting subordinate status. "Admiral, might I ask, was war ever really an option? Did you always know we would choose survival?" Hassan considered the question carefully. Earth's strategic planning included contingencies for military conflict, but our analysts believed the Zephyrian leadership was